My name is Al Debacker, and I was a surfer that moved up here from Southern California. I had hair down to my shoulders, and been married about a year, and I was happy and go-lucky, and I had graduated from college and wanted a change. Moved up here to Oregon, and I got a job out of college as the quality control director for the state of Oregon. And so my job was to go around and inspect A&W restaurants. Ken was always very kind to me, and I used to have to come in and inspect his restaurant. And Ken had a lot of pride, and he ran a great restaurant, but it was my job to find something wrong. So I was the inspector for A&W. And, I be honest with you, it wasn't much to find, but I'd find one or two things and let Ken know that these are the areas that he'd need to change, and I'd be back in 30 days to make sure they were done. Finally, after about a year of that relationship or something like that, Ken called me and said, are you at all interested in managing a restaurant? Well, I was making $1,000 a month. I had a company car. I was wearing a suit. I was thinking, well, why would I want to manage a restaurant? But I liked Ken and Harold, and I sensed that these guys really knew what they were doing in the business, and I certainly didn't. I remember going home and saying to my wife, I said, I know this sounds crazy, but I think I ought to go manage a restaurant for a while. And that's our relationship. I came down and went to work for your dad, I just started out as a restaurant manager. Knew very little about the business. I didn't know anything about fryer temperatures or hamburgers or freezers or mopping or cleaning and all the stuff that Ken was really good at, plus the business side of it. And so that's how we, developed a relationship. Honestly, Ken ran the best fast food restaurant. And I used to tell people we were fast food, but we weren't. Where the food was hot and fast, and we kept a great, very clean restaurant. He encouraged us to know people's names and a little bit about people. And I can remember franchisees coming in from all over the country because the store was number one. And, Ken would walk them around and show them the place. And of course, they would take me in the corner and say, is this really, what are you guys doing? What's the secret? Well, there's no secrets. I look around, it's just clean and fast food and good food and all those kinds of things. So there's no secrets. It's just running a good restaurant, and Ken did that as good as anybody. And then I've taken that into Figaro's for a while, but I've really taken it into my insurance business. Some of those same skills, common sense skills that I learned from Ken. I do remember when when I was fully managing, and your dad really, he was in every day, but he wasn't in all day like he was in the beginning. That when he walked through the door, we all jumped a little higher, we all moved a little faster, and I always appreciated it. I mean, I knew that, Ken had pretty high standards and expected us to do a good job for his business. I can tell you one of the best stories, and I've used this for 30 years, is we were always over portioning the Sundays, okay? And Ken was a stickler on portions, which was right as a businessman. And we would, put too much whipped cream on, or, too much of something. And Ken was always on my back about that, saying, Al, I've been watching those Sundays go out, there's too much whipped cream on them. And I didn't know what to do. So, my management style at the time was to yell at somebody. That's too much whipped cream. That's too much whipped cream. And I don't know if Ken went to some seminar back there in wherever it was, but he came back one day and he says, Al, why don't you try this? The next time they make a sundae just the way we want it made, compliment them. So I remember thinking, that won't work. I don't know why. I was 24 years old, 25 years old. I don't think that'll work. But hey, I'll give it a shot. And so, of course, now I'm waiting for the perfect sundae. The perfect whipped cream, the cherry on top, the little dribbles of chocolate down the side. And finally, somebody did it perfect. And I went over there and I took it out of her hand and I held it up with about 10 employees looking at it. And I said, now that's the perfect sundae. I said, see how the chocolate runs down the side and the whipped cream's just right, the cherry's on top. And I said, that's how we're supposed to make sundaes, and handed it back to him. And Ken was right. Within about 3 months, everybody wanted to make the perfect sundae. You know, he had opinions. Okay, he knew when the bricks was right on the root beer. He knew when the ice cream machine had been cleaned properly. And he did a lot of that through taste. He liked hot food. He liked fresh food. And so, yeah, we had those little baby mugs of root beer, and he'd run over the root beer and he'd test it, or he'd go downstairs in our root beer machine, and we had a thing called a bricks. I don't remember, we just called it the bricks thing. It would float, you know, and he would check it. And, you know, Ken inspected what he expected. He used to say all the time, please put the pickle in the middle of the bun, not on the edge. And you know, when you're in a hurry, come on, you're slapping the stuff on, throwing the pickles on. Blah. And today's world, it's the worst. You go to McDonald's or any place now, they just slap everything together, mustard hanging off the edge. We couldn't do that. No, the pickle had to be in the middle so that every time someone got a bite, they got a little piece of pickle at the same time. So anyway, I'll never forget the day that the ice cream machine just was making a noise, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it just wasn't working right. And I honestly worked on it for 2 hours. Ken was downstairs in the basement doing books and stuff. And I did not want to ask him because, you know, he's busy, he's got other things to do. I couldn't get it fixed. I couldn't get it fixed. And so I know your dad, he's just good with stuff like that. So I go down, hey, Ken, I can't get the ice cream machine fixed. And he was a little perturbed at me. He thought that was a pretty easy thing to do, and why didn't I just fix it? So I was embarrassed. Anyway, we stomp up the stairs, and your dad stomps up the stairs. And I'll never forget, he walks over to the ice cream machine, he puts his hand on it, and says, start her up. And I push the button, and it ran perfectly. Perfectly. I was so frustrated. Well, guess what? About a week later, a lady couldn't get her car started. Again, I'm not mechanical. I'm trying to help her get it started. I finally asked your dad, can you come out and kind of see what's wrong with this car? I'm not lying. Same thing. He walks upstairs, puts his hand on the car. He says, try it, start it up again. Starts right up. So from that point on, I said, Ken, you have the gift of mechanical healing. You just lay hands on things and they just start running the way they're supposed to. He really did have some skill sets that served him well throughout his whole life. But he kind of honed them in those restaurants. That's kind of where it all got started.